Hold your fire! I'm a human!
Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is a role-playing game that was developed and published by Squaresoft, released in North America on October 5th of 1992. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is a spin-off of the Final Fantasy series that was directly marketed as an entry-level role-playing adventure designed for the purpose of broadening the appeal of the RPG genre outside of Japan. Getting started, if you choose to not name your main character, you assume the role of Benjamin on his quest to save the world. Much like previous Final Fantasy entries, the game revolves around a set of 4 stolen crystals representing the elemental powers. You encounter many fighting companions, NPCs, and enemies along the way. In many ways, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is similar to some of the other Final Fantasy titles, but also it is very much different at the same time. Some of the main differences between Mystic Quest and the others revolve around the exploration and battle aspects. Your unique exploration occurs in a few ways. First, your character can freely roam around on the world map across various icons. You are, however, limited to the places you could visit based on your prior accomplishments. For example, if you did not clear out a particular section, you won't be able to fully advance the game. Secondly, when you're in towns and dungeons, you're able to do some mild platforming and puzzle solving. Inherently, your main character has a jumping attribute which can vault you 1 extra square away over tiny gaps, treasure chests, and so forth. You also acquire various weapons throughout your playthrough that serve doubly as puzzle solvers. These weapons include the axe that can clear trees, the bombs that can blow open sealed doorways, the sword that can hit switches, and the grappling hook that can clear wide gaps. I find that Mystic Quest puzzles are pretty good for pea-brained individuals like myself. I don't like beating my head against a wall for long periods of time, but I also appreciate when the puzzle at least mildly makes me think it through, which this does in a few ways, such as the ice dungeon puzzle and advancing all the way through max ship. The battle system and the way encounters are presented are quite unique. Gone are the random enemy encounters of basically every Final Fantasy game, and now your battles are literally shown to you in the form of enemy sprites or battlefields. Because of this setup, you actually have the ability to actively avoid many battles in the game, or at least a few that you don't want to go through. The setup of the battle screen is also a bit different. Your enemies lay before you in an almost Dragon Quest-like structure, with your characters and sprites on the screen having the camera from behind. I guess you could say it's kind of like a mix of early Dragon Quest and Phantasy Star games as far as the battle perspective and animations go. The aforementioned battlefields are spots on the map where you have the ability to go through a gauntlet of 10 battles before clearing them out and claiming a prize. The prizes could be armor, magic, GP, or experience. Don't fret, as you're able to do as you please in between battles, so it's not like you have to fight 10 in a row with no breaks. Of course, these are also essentially optional, but it's always good for some experience and rewards. You have some level of customization with the game, but nothing crazy like the other Final Fantasy titles. The way the life bar is displayed is quite odd, and I found myself switching it very early in the game to a more traditional number system. You're able to cycle between your weapons by utilizing L and R buttons, however all forms of armor, charms, magic, etc. that you find throughout your quest are auto-equipped as opposed to other Final Fantasy games where you typically have the autonomy on what you are wearing and using. In regards to magic, there are no real designated spellcasters in the game. Pretty much everybody knows some form of magic, which certainly helps make things easier. Throughout your journey, you're able to find spell items that add to you and your character's casting pools. The spellcasting system is actually more similar to the older Final Fantasy games on the NES, rather than that of the newer ones on the SNES. Meaning you don't have an overall MP pool to draw from, rather you have a set number of usages based off the particular spell types of white, black, and wizard magic. One thing that I want to mention regarding magic is I didn't do a great job of tinkering around with my spells in this game. Apparently I missed out on some very OP spell usages, and I didn't learn until way late in the game that you could actually heal both of your party members at the same time. Yeah, I thought you had to do it one at a time, and that kind of cost me in some instances. Because basically when you heal 2 people instead of the 1, it actually almost heals you the same amount, it's just a little bit less, so it's really not even worth it to heal just one person. Oops. Graphically, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is rather quaint, but kind of cute and has a lot of charm. Many of the colors pop, and I really do enjoy the sprite work, especially on the enemies and the fact that the sprites change as the enemies near death. And in the case with bosses, sometimes they will change multiple times. The controls are basically what you'd expect, and I didn't really find any difficulty whatsoever with the minimal platforming that does exist in the game. Perhaps the shining segment of the technical aspects of Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is the music and overall audio. It's absolutely stunning. The soundtrack was composed by Ryuji Sasai and Yasuhiro Kawakami, surprisingly not by the legendary Nobuo Uematsu. I don't even know what to say really. The soundtrack is easily one of the greatest of all time, not just on the SNES. My personal favorite track is the standard battle music. There's also so many bangers, including that of the boss theme, the opening theme, and the Shrine of Light theme, just to name a few. In fact, I would say that this soundtrack is so good that it raises the overall score that I gave this game considerably. It's that enjoyable. Difficulty-wise, as you might expect for a beginner's RPG, it's really not too bad. Sure, a few of the boss battles and random encounters can be a bit frustrating, but if you apply some decent strategy, you'll only find little resistance. I personally cleared out every battlefield and the majority of the enemy sprite encounters in the dungeons, but I'm sure you could do without that if need be. One of the things that does make this game a bit frustrating are the status conditions. Oh yes, my favorite. Falling asleep, petrification, and confusion, to name some of the most annoying, will likely be headed your way numerous times. Luckily, if you fall victim to these conditions and lose, you have the ability to basically just redo the battle again as long as you don't, quote, give up. Rather forgiving overall. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is a game that I've had in my collection ever since early high school when I found it at a local video rental store for about $1. It wasn't until recently that I decided to actually play through to see what it was all about. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is indeed a beginner's/gateway RPG. In that aspect, I feel like it does its job very well. Of course, for a seasoned RPG veteran such as myself, you may not enjoy this title too much, especially when you have a deep, vast RPG library to choose from on the same console. I give Final Fantasy Mystic Quest a 6 out of 10. It was a fairly average experience that was greatly boosted by the overall look, feel, simple puzzles, and soundtrack. Honestly, if not for the soundtrack, I probably would have given this game a 5 out of 10. There are certainly much better games to be played, but I don't think it would be a complete waste of time should you choose to indulge. If you've enjoyed this review, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing if you haven't already. I like conversing with my viewers in the comment section, and obviously I just want to see your guys' feedback. Until next time.